1. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, Russia's Great Mystery. In January 1959, 9 experienced hikers, all young students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, set out on an ambitious journey across the northern Ural Mountains in Russia. The leader of the group, Igor Dyatlov, carefully planned the trek, and while the winter conditions were harsh, the group was more than capable of handling it. Their goal was to reach Otorkin, a mountain known as Don't Go There in the local Mansi language. They never made it. When the group failed to return on their scheduled date, a search party was dispatched. What they found has haunted historians, investigators, and adventurers ever since. On February 26, the rescuers found the group's campsite. Their tent had been slashed open from the inside. The belongings, clothing, and even shoes of the hikers were left behind in a chaotic scene, as though they had fled in a state of panic. In sub-zero temperatures, this was nothing short of a death sentence. Following the footprints in the snow, the rescue team discovered 5 bodies. 2 were found under a tree, huddled around the remains of a small fire, dressed in only their underwear. The other 3 were scattered nearby, positioned as if they had been crawling back to the tent, but succumbed to the cold. Their causes of death were initially thought to be hypothermia, but that was just the beginning of the mystery. 2 months later, the remaining 4 hikers were found in a ravine further away. Their bodies presented even more bizarre injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, 2 had broken ribs, and another was missing her tongue. Strangely, there were no external injuries that could explain the fractures, as if something had caused extreme internal pressure. Even more chilling, some of the bodies were found to have high levels of radiation on their clothing. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the incident, ranging from avalanches and animal attacks to secret military tests and UFOs. Yet none of these theories account for all the strange details. The official cause of death remains listed as compelling unknown force, leaving the story of Dyatlov Pass one of the greatest unsolved mountain mysteries in history. 2. The Beast of the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail is one of the longest continuous footpaths in the world, stretching more than 2,100 miles from Georgia to Maine. The trail, which winds through some of the most rugged and isolated mountains in the eastern United States, is known for its breathtaking beauty, but also its eerie, haunting atmosphere. Hikers have often reported strange occurrences on the trail, distant footsteps when no one is there, eerie whispers carried on the wind, and sudden feelings of dread while deep in the forest. But the story of Sarah, a seasoned solo hiker, stands out as one of the most chilling. In 2008, Sarah decided to spend a few months hiking the Appalachian Trail. She had done several long-distance hikes before, but the Appalachian was something special. After weeks of trekking through the dense forests and rugged terrain, she felt more connected to nature than ever before. But that sense of peace was shattered one night near the Tennessee-Virginia border. It was early September, and the nights were starting to grow colder. Sarah set up camp for the night at a remote spot deep in the woods, miles away from any other hiker or civilization. As she lay in her tent, reading by the dim light of her headlamp, she heard a rustling sound outside. At first, she dismissed it as a deer or some other small animal, but the sound grew closer and more deliberate. Then came the footsteps. They were soft but unmistakable. Someone or something was circling her tent. The footsteps were slow, almost cautious, as if whatever it was didn't want to be heard. Sarah's heart began to race. She grabbed her flashlight, her hands trembling, and flicked it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, but she saw nothing outside her tent. Then came the growl. It was low, guttural, and sent shivers down her spine. She couldn't tell where it was coming from. She had a small knife with her, but knew it wouldn't be much help if it was a large animal, or worse, if it was someone stalking her. Sarah didn't sleep at all that night, her senses on high alert, every little sound sending her into a panic. The footsteps and growling continued, never too close, but always just out of sight. At first light, she packed up her camp and hiked out as fast as she could. Sarah never saw what had stalked her that night, but she knew it wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. It was something much more unsettling. Other hikers have since reported similar experiences in that same area, with many claiming they felt a malevolent presence following them through the woods. To this day, Sarah refuses to return to that part of the trail, haunted by the memory of what she refers to as the Beast of the Appalachian. 3. The the Devil's Playground at Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak in Colorado is famous for its breathtaking views and the grueling climb to the summit, but there's one area on the mountain known to hikers and locals alike as the Devil's Playground, and not just because of the rugged terrain. Located near the summit, the Devil's Playground is notorious for sudden violent thunderstorms. The mountain's height and exposure make it a lightning magnet, and electrical storms can appear out of nowhere. But what really gives the area its name are the strange electrical phenomena that occur during these storms. Hikers report feeling their hair stand on end, their bodies tingling as if charged with electricity, and sometimes even seeing sparks dance along the ground and their gear. The sound of thunder is deafening, and lightning strikes so frequently and close by that the entire area seems to glow. In 1999, a group of climbers found themselves caught in one of these storms while descending Pikes Peak. As the lightning storm rolled in, they sought shelter in a rocky outcrop. Suddenly, the air around them crackled with static, and one of the hikers screamed as arcs of electricity danced across his backpack. Panicking, they rushed downhill, only to have the storm seem to follow them, the lightning growing more intense. One climber claimed that at one point he saw a figure in the storm, just out of reach, standing in the swirling fog and rain, illuminated by the flashes of lightning. But when the group made it to safety, there was no sign of anyone else on the mountain. Local legends say that the Devil's Playground is cursed, and anyone who spends too much time there risks more than just a lightning strike. Some claim the area is haunted by the spirits of those who died trying to conquer Pikes Peak, while others believe something far older and more sinister lurks in the storms, waiting for unsuspecting victims. 4. The Phantom Lights of Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta in Northern California is a place steeped in mystery and legend. Towering over the surrounding landscape, it has long been considered a sacred place by Native American tribes. But beyond its spiritual significance, Mount Shasta has gained a reputation as a hotspot for strange and unexplained phenomena. One of the most well-known stories involves the mysterious lights that people often see hovering around the mountain at night. The lights move erratically, changing colors and directions in ways that seem impossible for any known aircraft. Witnesses describe them as orbs that pulsate with an otherworldly glow, appearing and disappearing at random. In 1975, a group of campers near Panther Meadows saw the lights for themselves. The lights appeared suddenly in the sky, dancing over the peak of the mountain. At first, the campers thought they were seeing helicopters or planes, but as the lights moved in impossible patterns, they realized this was something far stranger. One of the campers, a man named David, claimed that the lights were watching them. As the lights grew closer, David began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread. He described it as a cold, creeping fear that washed over him. Despite the clear night sky, he felt as though a storm was brewing inside his mind, clouding his thoughts. The other campers reported similar feelings, and they quickly packed up and left the area, unwilling to spend another moment under the gaze of the lights. To this day, no one knows what causes the strange lights on Mount Shasta. Some believe they are the result of secret military operations, while others are convinced they are of extraterrestrial origin. Whatever the truth may be, the lights continue to appear, drawing curious adventurers and paranormal enthusiasts to the mountain, each hoping to catch a glimpse of the unknown. 5. The Cursed Hike of Mount Washington. Mount Washington in New Hampshire, infamous for its extreme weather, has claimed the lives of many hikers over the years. With wind speeds reaching over 230 miles per hour and temperatures that can plummet unexpectedly, the mountain's unpredictable nature makes it one of the deadliest in the U.S., but beyond the weather, there are stories of something far more sinister lurking on its slopes. In 1978, a group of 4 hikers set out to summit Mount Washington. They were well prepared and experienced, but they were not prepared for what happened that day. As they neared the summit, a sudden storm engulfed the mountain, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The group made the decision to turn back, but the storm disoriented them, and soon they were lost. Hours passed, and the group's fear began to grow. Then, out of the swirling snow, they saw someone standing just ahead. The figure was dressed in old-fashioned hiking clothes, completely still, watching them. Relieved, they shouted for help, but the figure didn't move. As they approached, the figure vanished, dissolving into the storm. Terrified, they hurried in the opposite direction, but it seemed no matter where they went, the strange figure would reappear, always just on the edge of their vision. The group eventually found their way back to the base, but they were shaken to the core. When they reported their encounter, locals told them they had likely seen the ghost of Mount Washington, a spirit said to belong to a hiker who died in a storm years ago, forever wandering the slopes. The ghostly figure has been reported numerous times over the years, always during certain storms. Some believe it's a warning to hikers, while others think it's a restless spirit doomed to relive its final moments, searching for a way off the mountain. 6. The screams on Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier, one of the tallest peaks in the contiguous United States, is a stunning but dangerous mountain. Known for its active volcanic status, it draws climbers and adventurers from all over. But with its beauty comes danger, not just from its treacherous terrain, but from something far darker. In 1997, a solo climber named Mark was attempting to ascend Mount Rainier's challenging Emmons Glacier route. Mark was an experienced mountaineer, used to the solitude and challenges of solo climbing. As he neared the summit, he stopped to take in the view, but something strange caught his attention, a faint sound carried on the wind. At first, he thought it was the wind whistling through the rocks, but then he heard it again, a human scream. Thinking another climber might be in trouble, Mark quickly scanned the area but saw no one. The screams continued, growing louder and more desperate, but no matter where he looked, he couldn't find the source. Alone on the glacier, miles from the nearest climber, Mark felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The screams seemed to echo from all directions, as though they were coming from the mountain itself. They were too real, too urgent to ignore, but despite searching for hours, Mark found no sign of anyone. Exhausted and shaken, he made his way back down the mountain, the sound of the screams still ringing in his ears. Later, when he told park rangers about his experience, they revealed that Mark wasn't the first climber to report hearing screams on the mountain. Over the years, multiple climbers had heard the same chilling cries, often in areas where people had perished in previous accidents. Some believe the screams are the voices of those who lost their lives on the mountain, trapped between worlds, forever calling for help that will never come. 7. The disappearance of Pradeep Shrawn on Mount Kosciuszko. In May 2013, Pradeep Shrawn, a Canadian Army reservist, vanished while hiking Mount Kosciuszko in Australia's snowy mountains. Shrawn was an experienced hiker and had set out on a well-marked trail, fully prepared with proper gear. The weather that day was cold but manageable, and there was no indication that Shrawn wouldn't complete his hike. When he failed to return, a massive search effort was launched. Search teams scoured the mountain, using helicopters, tracking dogs, and infrared cameras, but there was no trace of him. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of Shrawn. What baffled searchers the most was that Mount Kosciuszko is a popular hiking destination, not particularly dangerous, and the trail he was on was well traveled. As the search continued, strange reports began to surface. Some hikers claimed to have heard distant shouts for help in the days following Shrawn's disappearance, but when they tried to locate the source, there was nothing. Others reported seeing a lone figure on the ridges, standing still just watching. But when search teams investigated, no one was ever found. Despite the extensive search, Shrawn's body was never recovered, and his disappearance remains one of Australia's greatest mountain mysteries. Many locals believe the mountain is cursed and that it takes people who wander too far off the path. To this day, some hikers claim to feel an eerie presence on the mountain, as though someone or something is watching them from the shadows. 8. The strange case of Alan G. on Ben Mactui. Ben Mactui is the highest peak in the Cairngorms, Scotland's second highest mountain, and a place of legend and fear. For centuries, locals have spoken of the Fear Liath Mor, the Big Grey Man, a mysterious creature said to haunt the summit of Ben Mactui. In 1891, respected mountaineer Professor Norman Colley had an experience that he would never forget. While alone near the summit, Colley suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of terror. As he hurried down the mountain, he heard heavy footsteps behind him, matching his pace step for step. But when he turned around, no one was there. Colley fled in panic, convinced that something huge and unseen had been stalking him. This story would be easy to dismiss if it weren't for the fact that many others have reported similar experiences. In 1958, A climber named Alan G. was attempting a solo ascent of Ben Mactui when he too felt an overwhelming sense of dread. As he approached the summit, Alan claimed he felt as though he were being watched by something huge just out of sight. He heard a low, rumbling growl and the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow behind him. Like Collie before him, Alan fled down the mountain without ever seeing the source of the sounds, but the experience left him shaken. The legend of the Big Grey Man continues to this day. Some believe it's a myth, a product of isolation and the desolation of the mountain. Others, however, are convinced that there is something on Ben Mactui, something that stalks the unwary, hidden in the mist. 9. The Phantom Monks of Mount Athos. Mount Athos in Greece is a sacred site, home to monasteries and religious hermits for over 1,000 years. The mountain, accessible only by men, is considered a place of deep spiritual significance. However, some monks have reported terrifying encounters with something they can't explain. In 1924, a monk was walking along a remote trail near one of the monasteries late at night. As he approached a small chapel, he noticed a group of robed figures standing just inside the entrance. At first, he assumed they were fellow monks in prayer, but as he drew closer, he realized something was wrong. The figures were silent, their faces hidden beneath their hoods, and they didn't respond when he called out to them. Suddenly, one of the figures turned towards him, revealing a face that was not human, pale, twisted, and grotesque. The monk fled in terror, convinced that he had encountered something demonic. Other monks have since reported similar sightings, claiming to see ghostly processions of monks walking silently along the mountain paths, disappearing into thin air. While Mount Athos remains a place of peace and spirituality, these ghostly encounters have led some to believe that the mountain holds darker secrets and that the spirits of long-dead monks may still roam its slopes, trapped between this world and the next. 10. The disappearance of Paul Fouget in Chiricahua Mountains. The Chiricahua Mountains in Arizona are a rugged and remote range, known for their dramatic rock formations and rich wildlife. But the area also harbors a haunting mystery, the disappearance of Paul Fouget, a park ranger who vanished without a trace in January 1980. Fouget was working at the Chiricahua National Monument on an ordinary day when he left the visitor center around 2 p.m. to check the trails. He never returned. His wife reported him missing when he failed to come home that evening, sparking a massive search effort involving helicopters, dogs, and volunteers. Despite the extensive search, there was no sign of Paul Fouget. No clothing, no footprints, and no equipment were ever found. What made the disappearance even stranger was that Fouget was a well-known and experienced ranger, familiar with the terrain and the risks. Some speculated that he may have met foul play, while others believed he had walked into the wilderness to start a new life, though there was no evidence to support this theory. Rumors of strange sightings in the area started to emerge in the years following his disappearance. Hikers claimed to have seen a man matching Fouget's description wandering the trails, only for him to vanish when approached. Others reported hearing disembodied voices calling for help deep in the wilderness. The case remains unsolved, and the Chiricahua Mountains still hold the mystery of Paul Fouget's final moments, leaving an eerie atmosphere for those who visit. 11. The Phantom of Kanchenjunga. Kanchenjunga, the third highest mountain in the world, has a dark history of fatal expeditions and strange occurrences. While many climbers are aware of the physical dangers involved in scaling such a massive peak, few expect to encounter anything supernatural. However, some who have braved the mountain report seeing a shadowy figure that haunts its upper reaches. In 1992, an expedition team from Nepal was ascending Kanchenjunga when they encountered thick fog near the summit. As they made their way through the blinding mist, one of the climbers noticed a tall figure standing on the ridge just ahead. At first, he thought it was a fellow climber, but when he called out, the figure did not respond. It stood completely still, facing the summit, shrouded in the swirling fog. When the climbers reached the spot where the figure had been standing, there was no one there. Startled, they pushed on, but the sense of being watched persisted throughout the remainder of their climb. Later, the Sherpas who accompanied the group mentioned a local belief in the Kanchenjunga Phantom, a ghostly presence that stalks climbers nearing the summit. Some say it's the spirit of a climber who died in the early 20th century, doomed to wander the mountain forever. The phantom is said to appear during periods of bad weather when climbers are most vulnerable. Several expeditions have reported similar sightings, shadowy figures, disembodied voices, and eerie footsteps in the snow. The Kanchenjunga phantom remains a part of mountaineering lore, a reminder that not all dangers on the mountain are physical. 12. The ghost plain of Mount Sanford. Mount Sanford, one of Alaska's tallest volcanoes, has long been a site of natural beauty and peril, but in 1948 it became the scene of a tragic and mysterious event. On January 26, a Douglas C-54 Skymaster military aircraft crashed into the side of the mountain during a snowstorm, killing all 44 people on board. The plane went down in a remote, inaccessible area, and for weeks, the wreckage could not be located due to heavy snow and poor weather conditions. When search teams finally reached the crash site, they were met with a gruesome scene. The twisted remains of the aircraft were strewn across the mountainside with no survivors. In the years since, however, strange reports have emerged from pilots flying over the area. Some claim to have seen the outline of a large plane, glowing faintly as it passes through the clouds. Others have reported hearing the drone of an engine or seeing flashing lights, only for the mysterious aircraft to vanish into thin air. Local bush pilots refer to this as the ghost plane of Mount Sanford, and some believe it's a residual image of the tragic crash, replaying in the skies over the mountain. Others think it may be the spirits of the passengers, unable to move on, forever flying the route that was cut short by disaster. Whatever the explanation, the sightings have continued for decades, making Mount Sanford not only a place of tragedy, but also one of spectral mystery. 13. The Mountain of the Dead. Dyatlov Pass follow-up. Though the Dyatlov Pass Incident has become the most famous mountain mystery in Russia, the area itself, the Ural Mountains, holds even more chilling tales. Locally known as Kholat Shackle, meaning Mountain of the Dead, the region has long been feared by the indigenous Mansi people. According to their folklore, the mountain is cursed, and those who disturb it may not return. Following the Dyatlov Pass tragedy, several expeditions have ventured into the region to study the area's strange occurrences, only to come back with terrifying stories of their own. In 1961, just 2 years after the original incident, another group of hikers disappeared in the same area. Their bodies were found later, showing no signs of injury or struggle. Like the Dyatlov group, they had apparently fled their tents in panic, leaving behind all their belongings. Search parties reported hearing bizarre sounds at night, low, guttural noises that seemed to come from the mountain itself. Some claimed to see lights dancing in the sky, similar to the ones theorized to have played a role in the Dyatlov Pass incident. Even the Mansi guides accompanying the searchers refused to stay in the area after dark, convinced that the spirits of the mountain were angered. To this day, local residents avoid Kholat Shackle, believing it to be haunted by the restless souls of those who have died on its slopes. Whether the mountain is truly cursed or simply the site of extreme natural phenomena, its deadly reputation endures. 14. The White Woman of the Andes. In the high Andes Mountains of Peru, local villagers and travelers alike speak of La Dama Blanca, the White Woman, who is said to haunt the narrow mountain passes. This ghostly figure is often described as a pale woman dressed in white, with long flowing hair. She is most often seen by people who are traveling alone, especially during the twilight hours when the mountain shadows grow long. In 2005, a group of hikers descending from Machu Picchu reported a strange encounter. As they made their way down the steep trail toward Aguas Calientes, they noticed a woman standing near the edge of the path, dressed in a traditional white Andean robe. Thinking she was a local, they called out to her, but she did not respond. One of the hikers, a man named Carlos, walked toward her to offer help, thinking she might be in trouble. As he got closer, the woman turned and looked directly at him, her face pale and emotionless. Carlos said her eyes appeared hollow, almost black. Before he could reach her, she stepped backward and vanished into thin air, leaving no trace. Locals later told the hikers that they had likely encountered La Dama Blanca, a spirit believed to be the ghost of a woman who perished while crossing the mountains centuries ago. According to legend, she appears to those who are in danger, sometimes to warn them, but other times to lure them toward their doom. Sightings of the White Woman continue to this day, leaving travelers wary of venturing alone through the high mountain passes. 15. the shadow people of the Alps. The Swiss Alps, renowned for their beauty and grandeur, have their own set of supernatural tales. For centuries, climbers and hikers have reported encountering shadowy figures that seem to stalk them from a distance, blending with the rugged landscape. These entities, known as the shadow people, are said to appear primarily during the twilight hours, when the light is dim and the landscape takes on a haunting quality. One such report comes from a mountaineer named Lars, who in 2011 was ascending the Eiger, one of the most dangerous peaks in the Alps. Halfway up, he stopped to rest and took in the breathtaking view of the snow-capped mountains. As he scanned the slopes, he noticed a dark figure standing on a ridge a few hundred feet away, watching him. Lars assumed it was another climber, though the figure's dark, featureless appearance struck him as odd. As he resumed climbing, he kept seeing the figure out of the corner of his eye. No matter how far he climbed or which direction he turned, the shadowy figure seemed to be following him, though it never came closer. At one point, Lars shouted toward the figure, but it remained still, unmoving. As the sun began to set, the figure disappeared altogether, leaving Lars unnerved. Other climbers have reported similar experiences in the Alps, claiming that the shadow people seem to appear when a climber is on the verge of a dangerous decision, whether to turn back or continue onward. Some believe the shadow people are manifestations of the mountains themselves, a kind of primal force warning travelers of impending danger. Whether real or imagined, the presence of these shadowy figures has unnerved many climbers, leading them to abandon their climbs altogether. 16. The tragedy of Malaysia Airlines Flight 653 and Mount Ledang. Mount Ledang, also known as Gunung Ledang, towers over the Malaysian jungle and is steeped in myth and legend. The mountain has long been regarded as a mystical place, with locals believing it to be home to spirits, supernatural beings, and strange occurrences. In 1977, the area gained further notoriety following the tragedy of Malaysia Airlines Flight 653. On December 4, 1977, the Boeing 737 was en route to Kuala Lumpur when it was hijacked under mysterious circumstances. Radio communication was lost, and the plane suddenly crashed into the dense jungle near Mount Ledang, killing all 100 passengers on board. The cause of the crash remains unclear to this day, with rumors of government cover-ups and paranormal interference swirling around the event. Locals who live near Mount Ledang claim that in the years following the crash, strange occurrences have plagued the area. Ghostly apparitions resembling passengers from the doomed flight have been spotted wandering near the crash site, and eerie sounds, such as disembodied screams and the hum of an aircraft engine, are said to echo through the jungle, especially during the night. Hikers have reported getting lost in areas where compasses and GPS devices malfunction, only to stumble upon charred remnants of the wreckage and experience overwhelming feelings of dread. To this day, some believe that the spirits of the passengers remain trapped in the jungle, reliving the tragedy, while others view the mountain as cursed, warning travelers to avoid it. 17. The Headless Hikers of Mount Baldy. Mount Baldy, also known as Mount San Antonio, is one of Southern California's most popular hiking destinations, but it's also known for a string of mysterious disappearances and macabre tales. The most unsettling of these stories is the legend of the Headless Hikers. In the 1930s, two hikers, brothers, set off to explore Mount Baldy's rugged trails. They were experienced outdoorsmen, familiar with the terrain, but when they didn't return by nightfall, a search party was sent out to find them. After days of searching, their bodies were discovered in a remote canyon, decapitated, with no trace of their heads anywhere in the vicinity. The authorities were baffled, as there was no sign of struggle, and the cause of the decapitation couldn't be explained by animal attacks or accidents. Since then, numerous hikers have reported strange encounters on Mount Baldy. Some claim to have seen headless figures moving through the fog at dawn or dusk, wandering the trails in eerie silence. Others have experienced sudden, intense feelings of fear and nausea in the same canyon where the brothers were found, often accompanied by the sound of faint, unearthly whispers. To this day, no one knows who or what killed the two brothers, but the legend of the Headless Hikers has become part of the dark history surrounding Mount Baldy. Hikers who venture too far off the beaten path often speak of a creeping sense that they're being watched by unseen forces. 18. The mysterious disappearance of Jill Klein on Mount Asahidak. Mount Asahidake, the highest peak on Japan's northern island of Hokkaido, is known for its volcanic beauty and serene landscapes. However, the mountain also has a darker side. In 1998, Jill Klein, an experienced American hiker, disappeared under mysterious circumstances while trekking alone on Asahidake. Klein had left early in the morning to explore a popular trail that wound through hot springs and volcanic craters. She was last seen by a group of tourists near the summit, happily snapping photos and talking about how peaceful the mountain felt. But when she failed to return that evening, a massive search was launched. For weeks, rescue teams scoured the mountain, but there was no sign of Jill. Her campsite and belongings were intact, and her camera was found near a ledge, but the memory card had been wiped clean. What's even stranger is that the rescue dogs seemed disoriented, refusing to track her scent past certain points, as if something was preventing them from going further. In the years since Jill's disappearance, hikers have reported seeing a lone figure resembling her standing on a ridge, waving as if calling for help. But when approached, the figure vanishes. Some locals believe that Jill became a mountain spirit, a lost soul unable to leave Asahidake's mystical embrace. The mountain, known in folklore as a place where spirits and deities reside, continues to claim the occasional hiker, adding to its eerie reputation. 19. The Whispering Wind of Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji, Japan's iconic volcano, is not only a place of pilgrimage and beauty, but also one steeped in paranormal lore. The sacred mountain has long been associated with supernatural phenomena, including the famous legend of the Whispering Wind. Climbers and pilgrims who ascend Mount Fuji often report hearing voices carried on the wind, especially at higher altitudes. These voices are described as faint, almost imperceptible whispers, but they seem to grow louder the closer one gets to the summit. What makes this more terrifying is that climbers who travel alone are the ones most likely to hear the whispers, as though the voices are specifically targeting them. In 2003, a solo hiker named Yuki recounted a harrowing experience during his night ascent. As he neared the summit, he heard what sounded like a woman softly calling his name. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him, but the voice became clearer, repeating his name in an almost pleading tone. He stopped and looked around, but he was completely alone. The voice seemed to be urging him to step off the trail toward a steep drop. Yuki, shaken, continued upward, ignoring the voice. He later learned that many climbers who had fallen to their deaths on Mount Fuji had reported hearing similar voices before losing their footing. Some believe the mountain is haunted by the spirits of those who died while climbing, while others think it's the mountain itself calling for more souls. The Whispering Wind is still a part of Mount Fuji's folklore, a chilling reminder that the mountain is not only a place of spiritual significance, but also one that holds dark secrets. 20. The Lost Climbers of the Swiss Matterhorn. The Matterhorn, one of the most famous and deadly peaks in the world, has claimed the lives of over 500 climbers since its first ascent in 1865. While many of these deaths are due to the perilous conditions, avalanches and falls, there's another, more mysterious aspect to this mountain's legacy: the lost climbers. In 1925, a team of 4 climbers set out to conquer the Matterhorn. They were well prepared and had a local guide who knew the mountain's dangers. But after a sudden storm rolled in, all contact with the group was lost. Rescue teams combed the mountain for weeks but found no trace of the climbers. The storm had erased all their tracks, and no bodies were ever recovered. In the years since their disappearance, other climbers have reported strange sightings on the Matterhorn, particularly during bad weather. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures climbing just ahead of them, only to vanish when approached. Others have heard what sounds like ice picks and crampons scraping the rock, though no other climbers are nearby. The legend of the lost climbers has become part of Matterhorn folklore, with many believing that the spirits of the missing climbers are still attempting to reach the summit. On particularly stormy nights, local guides said you can sometimes see faint lights moving along the ridges, as though the climbers are still making their way through the fog, forever lost in the icy wilderness. 21. The Black Mountain of North Carolina. Black Mountain in North Carolina is part of the Blue Ridge Mountains, known for their scenic beauty and rich history. But Black Mountain has earned a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the region, particularly due to reports of shadowy figures and strange phenomena. In 1973, A family camping near the base of Black Mountain reported a disturbing experience. Late one night, as they sat around the campfire, they noticed a figure standing just at the edge of the woods, watching them. The figure was tall, completely black, and had no discernible features. At first, they thought it was a person, but as they shone a flashlight in its direction, the figure disappeared, only to reappear moments later in a different spot. Over the next few hours, the shadowy figure continued to circle their camp, always staying just out of the light. The family, terrified, packed up and left in the middle of the night. When they told their story to locals, they were told about the Black Mountain Phantom, a ghostly presence said to haunt the area, particularly around old homesteads and cemeteries scattered through the woods. Hikers who have ventured into the deeper parts of Black Mountain have also reported hearing footsteps behind them, strange whispers in the trees, and even sightings of ghostly figures watching from the ridgelines. The source of these hauntings remains a mystery, but many believe they are the restless spirits of settlers and Native Americans who lived and died on the mountain long ago. 22. The Banshee of Carruntoohill. Carruntoohill, the tallest mountain in Ireland, is a place of natural beauty and myth. But along with the legends of fairies and ancient gods, there is a darker tale that haunts its slopes, the legend of the Banshee. In Irish folklore, the Banshee is a harbinger of death, a ghostly woman who wails to forewarn of imminent tragedy. Hikers who have climbed Carruntoohill on stormy nights have reported hearing a bone-chilling wail carried on the wind. This eerie sound often comes from nowhere, rising in intensity before fading into the night. In 1987, a group of climbers reported hearing the Banshee during a particularly treacherous climb. As they neared the summit, a storm rolled in, and they were forced to take shelter. It was then that they heard the unmistakable sound of a woman wailing, far off but getting closer. At first, they thought it might be another hiker in distress, but the sound was unnatural, echoing from every direction. Terrified, the group abandoned their climb and descended the mountain. When they reached the base, they learned that another group had died in an avalanche on the other side of the mountain at nearly the exact time they had heard the wailing. Locals believe the Banshee had foretold the tragedy, her wails serving as a warning to those on the mountain. Since then, the Banshee's cries have been reported by others, always preceding an accident or death. The legend endures, a reminder that the Irish mountains, for all their beauty, are places of ancient spirits and dark omens. 23. The Haunting of Mount Roraima. Mount Roraima, located at the intersection of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana, is one of the most unique mountains in the world. Its sheer cliffs and flat summit, often shrouded in clouds, give it an otherworldly appearance. Local indigenous tribes believe the mountain to be the dwelling place of gods and spirits, and many stories surround this isolated, mist-covered plateau. In 2011, a group of climbers ventured to the summit of Mount Roraima to explore the famed Lost World. After a successful ascent, they decided to camp at the top for the night. But as darkness fell, the group began to hear strange, unidentifiable noises, low whispers that seemed to come from the dense fog surrounding them. At first, they dismissed the sounds as the wind, but as the night wore on, the whispers became louder and more distinct, as if people were speaking in a language they couldn't understand. Around midnight, one of the climbers, Thomas, saw a figure moving in the mist just beyond the edge of their campfire's light. When he called out to it, there was no response. The figure seemed to glide rather than walk and disappeared into the fog. Other members of the group reported seeing similar shadowy figures, all moving just out of sight, as though they were being watched. By morning, the fog had cleared, but the eerie feeling lingered. Locals later told the group that Mount Roraima is believed to be inhabited by the spirits of ancient ancestors, guardians of the mountain who do not take kindly to intruders. To this day, those who climb Mount Roraima often report strange sounds and sightings, as though the mountain itself is alive with the spirits of the past. 24. The Ghost of Mount Kailash. Mount Kailash, in Tibet, is considered one of the holiest mountains in the world. Hindus, Buddhists, and followers of Bon and Jainism revere it as a sacred place, but it's also known for its ominous reputation among those who attempt to climb it. Unlike other famous mountains, Mount Kailash has never been summited, despite many attempts. Legend has it that the mountain is protected by supernatural forces, and anyone who tries to scale its peak meets with disaster. In 2007, a mountaineering team from Russia reportedly attempted an illegal ascent of Mount Kailash, despite the mountain's spiritual significance and the local prohibitions. As they neared the higher elevations, the climbers experienced strange physical symptoms. Several reported feeling lightheaded and disoriented, but not because of altitude sickness. One of the climbers claimed to have seen a mysterious figure standing at the summit, a ghostly monk dressed in robes, who beckoned them forward. The figure disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Not long after, 2 members of the team fell ill and had to be airlifted out. The remaining climbers were forced to abandon the attempt. In the years following, one of the surviving climbers stated that he was convinced they had been cursed by the mountain, their failures not due to natural conditions, but because of supernatural interference. Many locals believe Mount Kailash is guarded by gods and spirits, punishing those who attempt to defile it with illness or death. To this day, no one has officially reached the summit of Mount Kailash, and the legend of its powerful protectors continues to dissuade climbers from attempting the ascent. 25. The Phantom Train of Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta in Northern California is already well known for its strange lights, UFO sightings, and mysterious disappearances. But perhaps one of the most unusual stories associated with this towering peak is the legend of the Phantom Train. In the early 20th century, a railroad track was constructed around the base of Mount Shasta to transport timber and supplies. However, the route was plagued by accidents. Several trains derailed on the tracks, often under mysterious circumstances. Perfectly good tracks would buckle, or signals would fail without explanation. Some attributed these incidents to faulty engineering, but locals believed the mountain was cursed. In 1926, a locomotive carrying passengers and supplies derailed during a stormy night, plunging off the track and into a steep ravine. All of the passengers and crew were killed. Since that night, there have been numerous reports of people hearing the whistle of a train and the chugging of its engine echoing through the mountain valleys, even though the tracks have long since been abandoned. Hikers have claimed to see a train's dim lights in the fog, only for the sound to fade as quickly as it appears. Some have even seen the specter of an old-fashioned train moving silently through the trees, passing through solid rock or disappearing into thin air. Locals refer to it as the ghost train of Mount Shasta, believed to be the spirits of those who died in the derailment, doomed to travel the mountain in a spectral loop, forever trapped between life and death. 26. The Cursed Climbers of Mount Everest. Mount Everest is famous not only for being the world's tallest mountain, but also for the number of climbers who have died attempting to reach its summit. The death zone, the region above 8,000 meters where the oxygen levels are so low that the human body begins to shut down, has claimed many lives. But some climbers believe there's more than just natural danger on Everest. They believe the mountain is cursed. In 1996, during the infamous Everest disaster, several climbers died when they were caught in a fierce storm near the summit. Among them was Rob Hall, a seasoned New Zealand mountaineer. His death was tragic, but what happened afterward is even more chilling. Other climbers reported seeing a lone figure sitting on a ridge, dressed in Hall's distinctive climbing gear, long after his body had been recovered. In the years that followed, multiple expeditions have reported similar sightings, ghostly figures sitting motionless in the snow, seemingly waiting for rescue, only to vanish when approached. Sherpas believe these figures are the spirits of climbers who died on the mountain, their souls unable to rest due to the violent nature of their deaths. Everest's death zone is littered with bodies of climbers who perished over the years, many of which remain on the mountain because the conditions make recovery nearly impossible. Some climbers who passed these frozen corpses have reported hearing voices or seeing the bodies move, only to realize it was a hallucination or worse, something supernatural. The mountain continues to claim lives, and many believe that the spirits of the dead now haunt Everest, making it not just a physical challenge, but a spiritual one as well. 27. The Witch of Black Mountain. In the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, there's a particularly eerie legend surrounding Black Mountain, a remote peak covered in dense forest. Locals claim the mountain is haunted by the spirit of a witch who lived there centuries ago. According to the legend, the witch was cast out by her village after being accused of causing a plague that killed several children. She fled to the mountains, where she lived in isolation until she died. But death did not end her reign of terror. In 1948, A group of loggers working on the slopes of Black Mountain reported strange occurrences. Tools went missing, fires would inexplicably go out, and eerie laughter echoed through the trees at night. One worker, Henry, claimed to have seen an old woman dressed in tattered clothing watching him from the woods. When he approached her, she disappeared into thin air. Over the years, campers and hikers have reported seeing the same ghostly figure, an old woman with hollow eyes, always watching from a distance. Some say she can be heard whispering curses into the wind, especially at night. Others claim to have seen her standing on the ridges during thunderstorms, her figure illuminated by lightning before vanishing into the storm. Local legends warn that anyone who ventures too far into Black Mountain risks falling under the witch's curse. Hikers have reported sudden feelings of dread and disorientation, with some becoming lost for hours in areas where their compasses and GPS devices stop working. The Witch of Black Mountain is still said to wander the forest, punishing those who intrude on her domain. 28. The Green Boots Ghost of Everest. One of Mount Everest's most notorious landmarks is a grim reminder of the mountain's dangers, a body known as Green Boots. For decades, this frozen corpse, wearing green climbing boots, has rested in a small cave along the northeast route to the summit. Believed to be Suwain Palja, an Indian climber who died in the 1996 Everest disaster, Green Boots serves as a waypoint for those ascending the mountain. However, some climbers claim that Green Boots is not just a silent, frozen figure, but an active presence. In 2004, a climber named David Sharp was making his way up Everest when he sought refuge in the cave where Green Boots rests. Later, when he didn't return, other climbers who passed by the cave reported seeing him sitting next to Green Boots, motionless. Sharp had succumbed to the cold, sitting beside the very figure that had likely died in a similar manner years before. What's truly eerie is that since Sharp's death, multiple climbers have reported hearing whispers or soft groans when passing by the Green Boots cave. Some have claimed to see a shadowy figure standing just inside the cave, beckoning them to sit down and rest. Sherpas avoid the area, believing it to be haunted, and some even refuse to speak about it, convinced that Green Boots is cursed. Though many bodies remain on Everest, frozen in time, the presence of Green Boots and the strange phenomena reported around the cave have added a supernatural element to the mountain's already daunting challenge. 29. The vanished village on Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat, known as the supposed resting place of Noah's Ark, is an imposing volcanic mountain in Turkey that has captivated explorers and mystics alike. While the peak is famous for its biblical connections, there's a lesser-known story that's far more sinister. In the early 20th century, a small village nestled at the base of the mountain reportedly vanished overnight. According to local folklore, the village was inhabited by a community that was deeply religious, and they claimed to have seen visions of strange lights dancing on the mountain's summit. One night, the villagers heard strange humming noises coming from the mountain, and the next morning, no one could be found. The village was completely deserted. All belongings were left behind, and the homes were intact, but not a single person remained. Years later, in 1956, a team of climbers decided to explore the abandoned village. While searching the ruins, they found strange symbols carved into the rocks around the village. As they set up camp for the night, the climbers reported seeing lights on the mountain's peak and hearing the same humming sound the villagers had described. They awoke the next morning, disoriented, and found that one of their members had gone missing without a trace. Despite multiple searches, the missing climber was never found. Locals now avoid the area around Mount Ararat, fearing that the mountain itself may be cursed or home to supernatural forces that claim the lives of those who dare venture too close. 30. The Phantom Lights of Brown Mountain. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina lies Brown Mountain, a place long associated with strange, unexplained lights. The Brown Mountain Lights have been reported for centuries, with Native American legends describing the phenomenon as the spirits of fallen warriors. These glowing orbs, which appear to float above the mountain's ridges, have baffled scientists and locals alike. In 1913, a group of prospectors ventured into the area to mine for gold. One evening, while sitting around their campfire, they saw the lights dancing in the distance. Curious, they decided to follow them, believing they might lead to a hidden treasure. As they ventured deeper into the forest, The lights led them further away from their camp until they suddenly vanished. For days, the men wandered the wilderness, unable to find their way back. They became disoriented, even though they had marked their trail carefully. Eventually, only one of the men stumbled out of the woods alive, babbling incoherently about how the lights had followed them, whispering their names and luring them into the mountain's depths. The other prospectors were never seen again. To this day, hikers and campers continue to report sightings of the Brown Mountain lights. Some believe they are the spirits of the lost prospectors, while others claim the lights are of extraterrestrial origin. Whatever their cause, the Brown Mountain lights remain one of the most enduring paranormal mysteries in the United States. 31. The Cursed Expedition of Mount Kinabalu. Mount Kinabalu in Borneo is the highest peak in Southeast Asia and revered as a sacred site by the indigenous Kadazan people. According to local belief, the summit is the resting place of the spirits of their ancestors, and climbers are urged to show respect when attempting to scale the mountain. However, in 2015, a group of tourists disregarded these customs, leading to a chilling chain of events. On May 30, 2015, a group of 10 foreign climbers reached the summit of Mount Kinabalu and decided to take nude photos, mocking the local traditions and angering their guides. Shortly after the incident, a powerful earthquake struck the region, killing 18 people, including several climbers on the mountain. The indigenous community believed the earthquake was caused by the climbers' disrespect for the sacred site, as the spirits of the mountain were angered. What's even more disturbing is that following the earthquake, several rescue workers and surviving climbers reported strange occurrences. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures moving among the rocks, while others heard voices calling their names, even though no one was nearby. A few climbers who had survived the earthquake said they felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were being watched by unseen forces. The Kadazan people performed a ritual to appease the spirits, but many believe that the mountain remains cursed, especially for those who fail to respect its sacred status. Even today, climbers who ascend Mount Kinabalu report feeling a heavy, oppressive atmosphere near the summit, as though they are not alone. 32. The missing pilot of Mount Hood. Mount Hood in Oregon is a popular destination for hikers and climbers. However, it also has a reputation for strange disappearances. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1947 when a small plane piloted by Ken Ruxton disappeared over Mount Hood during a routine flight from Portland. Despite favorable weather conditions, Ruxton's plane vanished from radar and a search was launched. For weeks, rescue teams scoured the mountain and the surrounding wilderness, but found no trace of the plane or its pilot. The search was eventually called off, and the disappearance became one of Mount Hood's enduring mysteries. However, that's not where the story ends. In the years following the disappearance, hikers have reported hearing the sound of a plane engine high up on the mountain, even when no planes were in the area. Some climbers have even claimed to see the figure of a man in an old-fashioned pilot's jacket walking along the ridges, only for him to vanish into the mist when approached. In 1975, a group of climbers discovered pieces of what appeared to be an aircraft wreckage on a remote glacier, but when they returned with a search party, the wreckage had disappeared. Many locals now believe that the spirit of Ken Ruxton is still wandering the mountain, searching for a way home. Mount Hood continues to be a place where mysterious disappearances and strange phenomena occur, making it a magnet for both climbers and those fascinated by the unexplained. 33. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, a second expedition. Though the Dyatlov Pass Incident from 1959 is one of the most well-known mountain mysteries, few people know about a second, lesser-known expedition that ventured into the same region years later. In 1967, a group of Russian geologists, fascinated by the unsolved mystery of the Dyatlov group, decided to explore the Ural Mountains in search of answers. They carefully planned their route to avoid the same area, but ended up in a region only a few kilometers away. Over the next few days, strange occurrences began to plague the group. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, compasses spun wildly, and the temperature seemed to drop unnaturally low. On the third night, the group awoke to the sound of something moving outside their tent. One of the geologists, Alexei, unzipped the tent to look, only to see what he described as glowing orbs of light floating among the trees. The orbs seemed to move with purpose, slowly circling the campsite. Terrified, The group huddled together inside the tent, but the lights remained for hours, hovering in silence before disappearing just before dawn. The next morning, the group found strange tracks in the snow that didn't belong to any of them. Shaken by the encounter, they abandoned their expedition and returned to Moscow. One of the geologists, Eerie, later reported that he had recurring nightmares of the orbs following him, whispering in a language he couldn't understand. The 1967 expedition was quickly buried in Soviet archives, and no official explanation was ever given. The strange orbs seen by the second group mirror some of the unexplained phenomena reported by the Dyatlov hikers. To this day, theories of UFOs, military experiments, or paranormal forces continue to circulate about the mysterious. 34. The Crying Woman of La Malinche. La Malinche, also known as Malintzin or Matlalcoatl, is an inactive volcano in Mexico that has long been associated with legends of betrayal and sorrow. It's said to be haunted by the spirit of La Llorona, a weeping woman who roams the mountain at night, searching for her lost children. In 2002, a group of climbers camping on La Malinche reported hearing a woman's cries echoing down the slopes late at night. The sound was faint at first, but it grew louder, becoming an anguished wail. Believing someone was in distress, one of the climbers, Miguel, grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the sound. As he moved away from the camp, the cries seemed to move with him, always staying just out of reach. After an hour of searching, Miguel stopped, realizing he was far from camp and utterly alone. Suddenly, the wailing stopped, and the air became still. He turned to head back, but saw a figure standing a few feet away. A woman dressed in a long white gown, her face obscured by a veil of black hair. Miguel froze in terror as the woman slowly lifted her head, revealing hollow, empty eyes. She let out a final, bone-chilling wail before vanishing into the darkness. Miguel ran back to camp, where the other climbers had also heard the cries, but had been too frightened to leave their tents. Locals later told the group they had encountered La Llorona, whose spirit is said to haunt the mountains, mourning the loss of her children and forever wandering in search of them. The legend of La Llorona is one of Mexico's most famous ghost stories, but the sightings on La Malinche suggest that the spirit has a special connection to the mountain, appearing to those who camp on its slopes. 35. The Curse of the Utstal Alps. In 1991, two hikers stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in the Utstal Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. It was the mummified body of a man, now famously known as Ötzi the Iceman, who had been preserved in ice for over 5,000 years. While Ötzi's discovery was hailed as a major archaeological find, it soon became associated with an eerie curse. Over the years, several individuals involved in Ötzi's discovery and study died under strange or tragic circumstances. The first was Helmut Simon, one of the hikers who discovered Ötzi. In 2004, Simon went missing while hiking in the same region. His body was later found at the bottom of a cliff, apparently the victim of a freak fall during a snowstorm. Shortly afterward, the head of the rescue team that had found Simon's body died of a heart attack. Over the following years, several more researchers, archaeologists, and scientists who worked with Ötzi also died, often in sudden and unexpected ways. These deaths led some to believe that Ötzi was cursed, his ancient spirit angry for being disturbed. Local folklore even began to incorporate the idea that Ötzi was a shaman or powerful figure in his time, whose spirit now guards the mountains against those who dare to explore them. To this day, people still associate the Utstal Alps with this so-called curse, adding an element of mystery to an already haunting location. Despite this, the Alps continue to draw hikers and adventurers who are unaware of, or undeterred by, the ominous history surrounding Ötzi. 36. The Legend of the Yeti in the Himalayas. The Himalayas, the tallest and most rugged mountain range in the world, have long been home to stories of the Yeti, also known as the Abominable Snowman. For centuries, Sherpas and Tibetan monks have spoken of a large ape-like creature that roams the high-altitude regions, stalking mountaineers and occasionally attacking them. In 1951, renowned mountaineer Eric Shipton was leading an expedition through the Himalayas when he and his team came across a series of large, human-like footprints in the snow, far too large to belong to any known animal. Shipton took photographs of the prints, which soon circulated around the world, fueling speculation about the existence of the Yeti. In the years since, many climbers and hikers have reported strange occurrences high in the mountains. One of the most famous encounters occurred in 1986 when a team of climbers attempting to summit Mekalu, the world's fifth highest peak, heard guttural growls echoing through the cold night air. They initially thought it was the wind, but the sounds persisted. Later that night, one of the climbers, Sergei, left his tent to relieve himself. Moments later, the rest of the team heard him scream. Rushing out to investigate, they found Sergei's footprints leading away from the camp, ending abruptly at the edge of a steep drop. His body was never recovered, and no sign of struggle was found. Locals believe that Sergei was taken by the Yeti, adding another chilling chapter to the lore surrounding the creature. While some dismiss the Yeti as nothing more than myth, others remain convinced that something far more mysterious and dangerous lurks in the shadows. 37. The vanishing of Zygmunt Luboski in the Tatra Mountains. In 1929, a Polish mountaineer named Zygmunt Luboski set out to climb the Tatra Mountains, a range that forms a natural border between Poland and Slovakia. The Tatras are known for their stunning beauty, but also for their treacherous cliffs and unpredictable weather. Luboski was a seasoned climber and had tackled many difficult peaks before, but something went terribly wrong during this expedition. Luboski was last seen by a group of hikers as he ascended toward one of the highest peaks, Rizi, in what seemed to be favorable weather conditions. However, when he failed to return, a search party was dispatched. Despite weeks of searching, no trace of him was ever found, no equipment, no body, no clothing. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. In the years that followed, strange stories began to emerge from hikers and climbers who ventured into the same area. Some claimed to have seen a lone figure resembling Luboski standing on a distant ridge, staring down at them before disappearing into the mist. Others reported hearing his voice calling out for help, echoing through the mountains, though no one was ever found. Local folklore suggests that Luboski may have fallen victim to a Tatra spirit, a type of ghost said to haunt the mountains. These spirits are believed to lure hikers off the path and into dangerous situations, leading them to their deaths. The Tatras continue to claim lives every year, and Luboski's disappearance remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in the region. 38. The Cry of the Andes. In the Andes Mountains, particularly in remote regions of Chile and Argentina, there's a chilling legend of El Llanto del Diablo, or the Devil's Cry. It's said that at certain times of the year, usually during the coldest months, a wailing cry can be heard echoing through the mountain valleys. The sound is often described as a mix of human weeping and an animal's howl, and those who hear it are filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. In 1982, a group of 4 mountaineers from Argentina decided to climb Aconcagua, the highest peak in South America. On their second night, as they camped near the summit, they'd heard what they initially thought was the wind howling. But soon the sound grew louder and more distinct. It was the unmistakable cry of something, or someone, in pain. One of the climbers, Hector, ventured out of the tent to investigate, but he returned pale and shaken. He claimed he had seen a shadowy figure in the distance, standing on a ridge with its head thrown back as if it were the source of the wailing. The figure disappeared before his eyes. The next morning, the group hurried to descend, spooked by the previous night's events. When they reached the base of the mountain, they learned that 2 other climbers attempting to summit had died that night in an avalanche. Locals told them they had likely heard El Llanto del Diablo, a harbinger of death and disaster. According to the legend, those who hear the cry often face misfortune, and the climbers were lucky to have survived. Since then, other climbers on Aconcagua have reported hearing the same wailing, though no one has been able to explain its origin. The Andes are known for their natural dangers, but some believe there are forces far older and more powerful at work in these mountains. 39. The Ghost of the Grand Tetons. The Grand Teton mountain range in Wyoming is known for its rugged beauty and steep, challenging climbs. It also has its fair share of ghost stories, the most famous of which is the tale of the Lady in White. In the 1960s, a young woman named Sarah set out on a solo hike up Grand Teton. She was an experienced hiker, well prepared for the journey, but something went terribly wrong. Sarah never returned from her hike, and a massive search effort was launched. Her body was eventually found near a cliff, having fallen several hundred feet to her death. It was ruled an accident, but some believe there was more to the story. Since Sarah's death, hikers and climbers in the area have reported seeing a woman dressed in white, wandering the trails near where she fell. The woman is often described as pale, with long flowing hair and an ethereal appearance. She appears lost, sometimes calling out as though she is searching for someone. When approached, she vanishes into the air, leaving no trace. In 2010, a group of hikers saw the lady in white near Hidden Falls, standing on a rocky outcrop just above the water. As they watched, she suddenly turned and walked off the edge of the cliff, disappearing into the mist below. Terrified, the hikers rushed to the spot, but there was no one there and no sign that anyone had fallen. Locals believe that Sarah's spirit is still trapped on the mountain, forever searching for a way home. The Grand Tetons remain a popular destination for hikers and climbers. 40. The Shadow People of Mount Washington. Mount Washington in New Hampshire is infamous for its extreme weather, but it also has a darker reputation among locals. Climbers and hikers who venture into the White Mountains sometimes report encounters with what are known as the Shadow People. These figures, described as dark, human-like shapes, are said to appear suddenly, often at dusk or in heavy fog. They are silent and still, but hikers claim to feel a sense of intense fear and dread when they see them. The Shadow People are often spotted near Tuckerman Ravine, a steep and dangerous part of Mount Washington that has claimed many lives over the years. In 1998, a group of hikers was descending from the summit when they noticed what looked like a man standing near the edge of a rocky outcrop. Thinking he was in trouble, they approached, but as they got closer, the figure disappeared. One of the hikers, Mark, said he felt an overwhelming sense of being watched and wanted to turn back, but the rest of the group insisted on moving forward. As they continued down the mountain, Mark spotted more shadowy figures in the fog, always just out of reach. He later described the feeling as if they were being herded toward the ravine. That night, one of the hikers slipped and fell into a crevice, breaking his leg. They had to call for a rescue, and only later did Mark reveal how many shadow people he had seen along the way. Some locals believe the shadow people are the spirits of those who have died on Mount Washington, warning others of the dangers that lie ahead. Others think they are something else entirely, dark entities that thrive in the isolation of the mountains, feeding on fear. 41. The Spectre of Mount St. Elias. Mount St. Elias, straddling the border between Alaska and Canada, is one of the most majestic and dangerous peaks in North America. Towering at 18,008 feet, it is known for its unpredictable weather and avalanches. However, experienced mountaineers speak of an additional danger: the Spectre of St. Elias. In 1972, an experienced climbing team, led by Alan Ridgway, attempted to summit Mount St. Elias. During their ascent, as they approached the higher altitudes, they reported feeling uneasy. Alan described an overwhelming sensation of being watched. On the third night of their climb, Alan woke to find a figure standing at the edge of their camp, cloaked in fog. It was a man, seemingly dressed in old mountaineering gear from the 19th century. When Alan called out to him, the figure turned and walked off into the darkness, disappearing into thin air. The following day, one of the climbers, David, saw the same figure standing on a distant ridge. By the time they reached the summit, the whole group had experienced sightings of this shadowy man. Locals later told them they had encountered the Spectre of St. Elias, believed to be the ghost of a climber from an ill-fated expedition in 1897, when several men perished in a violent storm near the summit. According to legend, the spectre appears before deadly accidents or extreme weather events. A year after Alan's team returned, another climbing group disappeared on Mount St. Elias, their bodies never found. Since then, climbers on St. Elias have continued to report sightings of the spectre, adding to the mountain's ominous reputation. 42. The Howling Wind of Mount Timpanogos. Mount Timpanogos, one of the most beloved and hiked peaks in Utah, also carries with it a haunting legend. According to local Native American folklore, the mountain is home to the spirit of a heartbroken princess who threw herself from the cliffs after her lover died in battle. Her spirit is said to wander the cliffs, and her sorrowful cries can be heard in the wind, especially during late autumn nights. In 1984, a group of campers stayed overnight near the base of Mount Timpanogos. Late in the evening, they heard what they thought was the wind howling down the canyon. But as the night went on, the sound became eerier, resembling a woman's wail. Christine, one of the campers, decided to investigate, believing it might be another hiker in distress. As she ventured further from the camp, the wailing grew louder, but when she reached a ridge overlooking the valley, she saw no one. Suddenly, the air became unnaturally cold, and Christine said she saw the faint outline of a woman standing at the edge of the cliff. The woman, dressed in flowing robes, looked as though she was about to jump. When Christine shouted, the figure turned and vanished into thin air. Shaken, Christine ran back to camp, where the others had also heard the wailing. Locals believe they had encountered the spirit of the princess, doomed to relive her final moments on the mountain. Since then, hikers on Mount Timpanogos have reported hearing similar cries carried on the wind, especially at night. Some have seen the figure of a woman wandering the cliffs, disappearing just before dawn. 43. The Red Eyes of Mount Diablo. Mount Diablo, located in California's Bay Area, is known for its stunning views and winding trails, but it also has a darker side. Legends about the mountain date back to the indigenous tribes, who considered it a place of powerful and often dangerous spiritual forces. In more recent times, hikers and campers have reported seeing strange phenomena, especially sightings of red, glowing eyes that appear in the darkness. In 1983, a group of teenagers camping near the summit reported seeing two bright red lights in the forest at night. Initially, they assumed it was a reflection from a car or distant building, but the lights seemed to move toward them, floating just above the ground. As the lights approached, the group felt an overwhelming sense of dread. One of the campers, Mike, shone his flashlight at the source, but there was nothing there, just the red lights, now hovering a few feet away. Terrified, the group ran back to their campsite. The lights followed them briefly before vanishing into the trees. Over the years, similar reports have emerged from hikers who venture too far off the trails. Some have even claimed to hear growling noises accompanying the lights, as though a predatory animal is stalking them. Local legends suggest that the red eyes belong to the spirit of a guardian that protects the mountain, scaring off those who disrespect the land. Others believe it's a supernatural creature linked to the dark history of the area, which includes numerous Native American battles and spiritual ceremonies. 44. The Black Dog of Ben Macdui. The Cairngorms in Scotland are home to Ben Macdui, the second highest peak in the British Isles. While many climbers are drawn to its challenging terrain, the mountain is also famous for being haunted by Amphir Leathmore, the big grey man of Ben Macdui. But in addition to this well-known legend, there's another terrifying presence that has been reported on the mountain, the Black Dog. In 1959, a climber named John Ainsworth was making his way down Ben Macdui when he spotted a large black shape moving through the mist. At first, he thought it was a sheepdog or stray animal, but as it came closer, he realized it was much larger. The creature had glowing red eyes, and its body seemed to fade in and out of the fog. John ran down the slope as fast as he could, the sound of heavy paws thudding behind him. When he reached the base of the mountain, the creature had vanished, but the terror of that encounter stayed with him for years. Other hikers have reported seeing the same black dog near the summit of Ben Macdui, always appearing during bad weather or at dusk. Some believe it's a manifestation of the Cú Seth, a legendary ghostly dog from Scottish folklore that is said to foretell death. The sightings continue to this day, with the Black Dog of Ben Macdui becoming part of the mountain's eerie and supernatural lore. 45. The Ghostly Climbers of Mount Shuksan. Mount Shuksan in Washington state is a challenging peak that draws climbers and adventurers year-round. However, it is also known for a more spectral presence, ghost climbers. In 1970, a tragic accident occurred when a group of climbers lost their lives in a rock slide. Since then, many have reported seeing climbers on the mountain who disappear without a trace. In 1995, Laura, a seasoned mountaineer, was ascending Mount Shuksan with her partner when they noticed two other climbers ahead of them. They waved to the pair, but the climbers didn't respond. As Laura and her partner caught up, they noticed something strange. The climbers were wearing old-fashioned gear, as if from decades ago. Before Laura could say anything, the two figures walked around a bend in the trail and vanished into the fog. Confused, Laura and her partner hurried around the bend, but found nothing. There were no tracks, no climbers, and no sign anyone had been there at all. After returning to base, they told their story to a local guide, who revealed that many climbers had reported similar sightings since the 1970s. It's believed that these ghost climbers are the spirits of those who perished in the rockslide, eternally repeating their last climb. Mount Shuksan remains a popular destination, but those who know the story keep a watchful eye for the spectral climbers, always wondering if they are truly alone on the mountain.